Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for coming.
There are reports now that the Israeli army is advancing into Rafah. Can you just tell us the state of play and what the plan is at this hour?
What we're doing is what we have to do to win this war. We have to destroy Hamas's fighting formations. They have 4 terrorist battalions left in Gaza. We can't leave them there because they'll reconquer the Gaza Strip, set up their military power again, and they've promised, they've vowed to commit these savage murders again and again and again. Again, the beheading of women, the raping of women, the kidnapping of children, the burning of babies. They promise to do it over and over again. So we can't let them get away with it. And the way to prevent it, a necessary way to avoid it, is to destroy those remaining terrorist battalions. So we're doing it. We're doing it carefully. We're evacuating the people. Up to now, 500,000 people have vacated Rafah. Evacuated safely. They've got out of the fighting zones because we asked them to leave. And we're going to complete the job. They go outside of Rafah, or outside the fighting zones. They move away because that's where we asked them to move. Hamas is doing everything in their power to keep them in harm's way, including sometimes shooting them if they try to leave. We do everything in our power to get them out of harm's way. Millions of text messages, phone calls, leaflets, and happily they move. It's important.
Do we expect a full-scale invasion, and what does that even look like?
I think what you're seeing is a responsible step-by-step action that we're taking, and the most important thing is to enable the civilian population to leave. That's been our basically our modus operandi from the beginning. That's why if you actually look at the ratio of civilians to combatants killed in this war, it's one of the lowest. It's perhaps the lowest in urban warfare's history, modern urban warfare, contrary to the reports that I heard. By the way, I heard the UN readjusted after 7 months its assessment of how many women and children were killed. Everyone is a tragedy, by the way. For us, every civilian killed is a real tragedy because a life is lost. But for Hamas, it's a strategy to increase the number of civilians killed. But nevertheless, we've achieved much lower numbers, and right now we're doing this with very low civilian deaths, and I hope it continues.
Well, and yet there is this perception in the world that you can do more to protect civilians in Gaza.
Well, no army has done more in history, and I don't say that. I mean, I do say it, but the one who says that is John Spencer, Colonel John Spencer, who's the head of urban warfare at West Point. He says that no army in history has gone to the lengths that Israel is going to prevent civilian deaths, losing the element of surprise, enabling time for the enemy actually to organize itself for the coming attack. But we do it because we do care about civilian casualties. And we're faced with a challenge that no army has faced, because you've got 35,000 terrorists holed up in a dense environment, 50 meters above ground sometimes, and 50 meters below ground in terrorist tunnels. And yet we're able to do this because we're committed to it, and we'll continue to do it.
There's also a report today that the U.S. administration is pushing to release $1 billion of weapons aid to Israel. Can you confirm that? And do you have a sense of when that will happen?
Well, I hope it happens soon. Look, I appreciate the help we received from the United States from the beginning of the war. President Biden came here. He sent also these battle carrier groups, and we got weapons. Yes, we do have a disagreement on Gaza, rather on Rafah. But we have to do what we have to do. And, you know, sometimes you just have to do what is required to ensure your survival in your future. We cannot continue into the future by having Hamas retake Gaza. It's not only would be a tremendous victory for Hamas, it would be a tremendous victory for the Iran terror axis, because Iran is trying to envelop us with a noose of death, of which Hamas is one component. And that victory is a victory against Iran. It's a victory for the moderate Arab states who are not openly, but who understand that their future is involved also with our victory against Hamas. So we are doing what we have to do, and I hope we can see eye to eye with the United States. We're talking to them, but ultimately we do what we have to do to protect the life of our nation and to prevent such savageries from being repeated again and again and again.
Is the U.S. withholding the heavy bombs, the 500-pound, 2,000-pound bombs?
Yeah, so far it has. I think that's out in the public. I hope we can overcome that. But I said, look, I said on Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is just a few days ago. I said, I appreciate the American help, but I can't allow Hamas to threaten us with this mass murder. And indeed, if they could, they would have done exactly what happened to us 80 years ago in the Holocaust. There we were completely defenseless, and they murdered 6 million of our people, a third of the Jewish people in the world. Hamas, if they could get away with it, they would do the same thing. The reason they can't get away with it is we push them back, but we're not going to leave them there. No one would. Would the United States leave an enemy right at its border, not thousands of miles away, but a few hundred yards away from its border, after it committed the equivalent of 20 9/11 massacres on one day, 50,000 Americans killed on one day, 10,000 held hostage by these criminals? I mean, it wouldn't happen. You know the United States wouldn't do it, and we wouldn't do it either. So we have to do what we have to do. And I paraphrase it. A nation's got to do what a nation's got to do. And today we can.
But can you win this fight without American support?
Well, the answer is yes. Although we value American support, we want American support, I'll do everything that I can to get American support, but not at the expense of our survival and our security. When we have to, we stand alone. And against these savages, we have to win. We don't have a choice. But you know, Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister, declared the independence of the State of Israel against American opposition. Secretary of State Marshall, at the time, opposed the independence of Israel. And actually, America imposed an arms embargo on Israel at the time. Yet Ben-Gurion did what he had to do. Prime Minister Menachem Begin in 1981 destroyed the Saddam Hussein's atomic bomb factory in Iraq, because that bomb was aimed to destroy Israel. And Ronald Reagan, the president at the time, slapped an arms embargo on us. He withheld F-16s, I think, for 3 months. But we did what we had to do. And over time, people see that, you know, you do what you have to do. Sometimes you have disagreements, but they recognize that those decisions were the right decisions. And I think they'll recognize over time that the decisions we're making now are the right decisions too. How's
your relationship with President Biden these days?
I've known him for much more than these days. I've known him for over 40 years. And, you know, it's been a friendship that is often laced with disagreements. President Biden said it openly, and I say it openly. But it hasn't blocked the friendship. But at the end, you know, I'm the Prime Minister of Israel. I have to take care of the one and only Jewish state. And I hope to do it as far as we can with agreements, but sometimes we just have to do, even when there is disagreements, we have to do what we have to do to assure the survival of the state of Israel.
Did it factor into your decision or calculus at all with regard to going into Rafah, the U.S. threat to withhold weapons?
It factored in, but it wasn't a decision that I made lightly. You know, I respect the United States. I respect the American presidents, whoever is in power, and certainly Joe Biden, and that's not an issue. But the responsibility is to do what you have to do to secure the future, to secure our basic security. So I do what we have to do, and you know, I hope that we can iron it out. In fact, all the disagreements we had over the years, including now in the Gaza war, this is not our first disagreement, but ultimately we overcame it. I'm sure we will this time too.
The administration has given you higher grades on the disbursement of humanitarian aid. What took so long to get that aid flowing in?
Well, for one thing, Hamas was looting it and still is looting it every day. You know, Hamas and others are looting it. So we get the aid into Gaza through multiple crossings that we've opened, through land routes that we opened, sometimes through airdrops that we've facilitated. And now we're trying through a maritime route that actually I initiated. So our policy from the start, from the beginning of the war, my policy was you have to provide the basic humanitarian aid that is required by international law. But in the last 6 weeks, we actually changed it, not merely to providing basic humanitarian aid, but flooding Gaza with humanitarian aid. And we're doing that. And right now, the difficulty we have, two difficulties actually. One is Hamas is looting. And the second is that one of these crossings, the Rafah crossings, we want open. We want to see it open. And we certainly want Egypt to release, to make sure that maximum humanitarian aid flows through this crossing and other crossings as well. And I hope we can come to understanding with that too with Egypt.
When for Rafah?
Rafah yesterday, if we could. I mean, that's not our problem. We're not holding up the opening of Rafah. I hope Egypt considers what I'm saying now, because I think it's good for, nobody should hold the Palestinian population hostage in any way, and I'm not holding them hostage. I don't think anyone should.
As far as the war,
we're fighting not the Palestinian population, even though many of them supported the massacre. We're fighting the terrorists embedded in those populations that Hamas is using as human shields.
And you mentioned there's 4 more battalions left. That's why you're targeting Rafah. Mm-hmm. Because I was going to ask how the war is going. We're seeing the return of Hamas in some of the northern cities that you had already conquered. The hostages have not been returned. So is it really going well?
Well, half of the hostages have been returned, and many didn't believe that we'd get that. And we've got the other half. I'm committed to getting all of them back. And it's heartbreaking to see what is happening to them in those terror dungeons and what is happening to their families. So Hamas is very cynical, very evil. And, you know, we are fighting sheer evil. I think a term that President Biden used, and it hasn't changed. They were sheer evil. They are sheer evil. But how do you do that? How do you fight them? How do you defeat them? The first thing to understand is that they're not just a terrorist organization. They have a terrorist army. It has organized battalions. That's how they have command and control structure. That's how, if you don't destroy the battalions, then a commander, a Hamas chieftain, can order 1,000 people to do this attack or that attack. So you have to smash those battalions. And after you smash those battalions, which we've done in other places, you have to come back and mop up, which is what we're doing in other parts of Gaza. It's not over quite until you first smash the battalions. How long does that take? Well, I said a few weeks ago, it'll take us a few weeks to go into Rafah. We are in a careful way to allow the evacuation of the population. But the intense part of the fighting, the smashing of the battalions, is just weeks away. It doesn't take that long. After that, yes, you'll have continual action, but at a much lower intensity, much lower scale, mopping up the remnants.
So it's a matter of weeks until this is over?
The Rafah operation, if continued as we plan, is a matter of weeks, not months and not years.
And then what after Rafah?
Mopping up. Sustain. You really need 3 things to finish this thing. One, you need a victory over the organized fighting formations. Then you have mop-ups. Then you have sustained demilitarization to make sure there's no terrorist resurgence, because, you know, they're still trying to regroup.
And that's happening, right?
Yeah, no, that's happening now, but we haven't finished destroying. The chieftains are still there. We killed, we got rid of 2 of the 4 commanders of Hamas. Another 2 to go. We'll get them. Okay? We won't rest until we get them. So you've got to get the chiefs, you've got to get the battalions, and then you have to mop up. All of that we're acting now to do. Once that is over, you have effectively the end of the war, certainly the end of the intense part of the war. What do you need then to reconstruct Gaza, to have a different future, so Gaza doesn't pose a threat to Israel anymore? You need to have 3 things. 1, sustained demilitarization, and that, I think, can only be done by Israel intervening when it can, when it sees another terrorist resurgence. The second thing you need is a civilian administration that is not Hamas and not beholden to the destruction of Israel. And I think that can be done with the assistance of Arab countries and the international community. And the third thing you need is reconstruction. That, I think, can be done with the help of important players in the international community. But you've got to clear Gaza of Hamas. You can't have a future for Gazans, for the Palestinians in Gaza, or a future for Israel, or a future for a broader Middle East peace if Hamas emerges victorious. And if it's undefeated, it emerges victorious. That's a tremendous victory for them, a tremendous defeat for all of us. What do Gazans, what do Hamas, what do they want? What do they chant? They chant death to Israel, death to America. What does Iran want that sponsors Hamas? Death to Israel, death to America. And by the way, there are supporters in the United States on those campuses. They chant the same things. Death to Israel, death to America. Unbelievable. Now, I know that doesn't reflect the vast majority of the American people. When asked, who do you support, Israel or Hamas, 80% of Americans say they support Israel. 20%, it's still a huge number, say they support Hamas. It's the same 20% that when polled say that bin Laden was right. So they hate America. That's why they hate Israel. They don't hate Israel because of America. They do actually. They don't hate America because of Israel. It's the other way around. They hate America because they hate Israel. They hate the whole idea of democracy, liberal societies. They view us all as, colonial implants. Colonial implants. We're here in this country. We're sitting in this city, which King David declared as our capital 3,000 years ago. So, I think everything is spun in the other way, but we're fighting for the truth and fighting for our future, and we'll continue to do that.
Because there are questions about what happens after and what Israel wants to see, whether Israel wants to occupy Gaza, and who you really want to see operate in that power vacuum. What should it look like?
It'll be a power vacuum. First of all, it shouldn't be a power vacuum that Hamas is controlling, because that's not a power vacuum. Those who tell us stop the war now, leave Hamas in place, leave those 4 battalions in Rafah, are basically saying enable Hamas to regroup, recapture Gaza, and threaten you again. That's not going to happen. So I think what I'd like to see is a non-Hamas civilian administration there with an Israeli military responsibility, overall military responsibility. That's the only thing that would work. But there's one precondition. The day after Hamas is the day after Hamas. The day after Hamas is destroyed. You can't have it both ways. You can't leave Hamas there and talk about the day after, because you're not going to have a day after. You'll just have a repetition of these same horrors.
Can you talk about a two-state solution after you remove Hamas?
Look, the two-state solution that people talk about is basically would be the greatest reward for the terrorists that you can imagine. 80% of Palestinians in Gaza and in Judea Samaria, in the West Bank, support the savagery. Giving them a state would do 2 things. One, it would be a tremendous reward, a historic precedent of giving those people who committed the worst massacre against the Jewish people since the Holocaust on a single day, giving them a prize. And second, it would be a state that would be immediately taken over by Hamas and Iran, and it wouldn't advance the purposes of peace. It would just be a launching ground for a future war against Israel. I think that that's not in the works, and most Israelis by now, a huge number, would say, don't do that. I would argue that if we defeat Hamas, we should strive for something that I've long believed we can do in the Middle East, and that is have the populations, the Palestinians, have all the powers that they need to govern themselves, and none of the powers that could threaten Israel's survival. And that means that the military responsibility in the Palestinian areas adjacent to Israel would be left to Israel. Otherwise, Iran comes back in. We left Lebanon, Iran came in with Hezbollah. We left Gaza, Iran came in with Hamas and Islamic Jihad. If we were to do that a third time, the same thing would happen. So that's not good for the Palestinians, it's not good for Israel, it's not good for peace, it's bad for the world. It's not good for America. I think this formula that I say, the Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers to threaten us. That's the right thing. And that, by necessity, means that certain sovereign powers, the most important one being the responsibility for overall security, is maintained with Israel. I think that's the realistic solution.
Is the U.S. withholding intelligence about Hamas leaders' whereabouts?
I don't think so.
Because there was a report that they were in an effort to keep you from invading Rafah.
No, I don't think that's true. Anyway, the main intelligence on Palestinians, and believe me, in a much broader radius in the Middle East, is we have by our own. And of course, we appreciate the intelligence cooperation. America often helps us. You should know that Israel always helps America with a lot of intelligence that saves American lives in many, many parts of the world, and especially here in the Middle East. Israel is a valued ally of the United States. I don't think America has a better ally than Israel, and I believe that Israel has no better ally than America. Doesn't mean we don't have disagreements. Do you have disagreements in your family, Sarah?
Of course.
Yeah, so we have disagreements in our family, too.
You mentioned Iran, and it does raise this question of the never-ending war, and that is, how do you stop all of this without stopping Iran, which is funding Hamas and Hezbollah and others?
Well, I think you're right. I think ultimately we have to. We have to confront Iran and prevent it not only from closing on this noose of death that they're trying to put around us, beginning with Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and their radical Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. They're trying to envelop us and choke us while we're fighting back, beginning with Hamas in Gaza. But this is not merely our battle, it's also your battle. Because if they were to achieve, if they could knock out Israel, they got the Middle East. And if they got the Middle East, they're going to be going right after you. They say it. You know, they chant death to Israel, death to America. They want to develop, and this is the worst part, not only conquering the Middle East, which we're preventing them from doing, but also developing intercontinental ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear warheads that could hold any city in the United States hostage. I don't think you want that. So confronting Iran, rolling back Iran's aggression, preventing it from getting nuclear weapons is not merely Israel's interest, it's America's interest. It's the interest of all the moderate Arab states who understand, like us, that they're in danger too. But they're just endangered in regime change. They'd throw them out and put their own puppets there. In our case, it's not just the government they want to destroy. They want to destroy the country. They want another 6 million Jews dead. It's close to 7 million, I'm happy to say we have now. Not happy to say that they'll be destroyed. They won't be. But if they could, that's what they would do, and we won't let them do it.
So where does that leave Hezbollah? Because, 80,000 Israelis are evacuated or displaced from the north. How likely is it that we see a war on the northern front?
We're committed to having them return. They left because of Hezbollah's rocketing, gunfire, and so on the border. We're committed to have them back. We either get them back without a military action, through diplomatic efforts, or with a military action.
By September?
I don't want to announce dates, but I think Hezbollah understands that we're not going to allow this to continue.
So there is a diplomatic path there?
Well, it depends on Hezbollah. They have to understand that the alternative is very bad for them. I don't think they want to. I think many were surprised by the strong response that we gave to the Iran axis, terror axis in Gaza. And I think Iran was surprised by the failure of their weapons to penetrate Israel. They were sure that they would penetrate, and we were grateful for the American and international assistance in this. But the main thing was Israeli technology and things that I can't talk about that prevented this. But it is also purported that we were able to surprise them in other things. So I think no one should underestimate the resolve of Israel to defend itself or its ability to do so, least of all Hezbollah.
What about your own resolve? There is a perception that you are prolonging this war for your own political power.
Yeah, well, I'm not concerned with my future. I'm concerned with Israel's future. I read the other day in an esteemed American paper by an esteemed journalist. He said Netanyahu wants the war to continue because if it doesn't, and he's taken out of office...
A lot of people feel that way. Go to jail, even.
Yeah, his trial would resume. Sarah, my trial has been ongoing since I resumed office. In Israel, elected prime ministers do not have any immunity from prosecution. Happily, this case is unraveling. And a few months ago, the judges called the prosecutors in and said, you really should drop your chief charge, the bribery charge. The judges are telling the prosecution that. So I'm not worried about the trial. I'm worried about Israel's trial and tribulations. And I'm going to do what I have to do to finish this war. And as far as I'm concerned, we could finish it as quickly as possible, but we have to do so by finishing the war, by winning the war. That means destroying those battalions.
Do you have the support of your own people? Because we are seeing protests by the thousands demanding a deal where they release the hostages no matter what.
Well, Hamas, anybody who says get a deal at any price means basically capitulate to Hamas. What does Hamas say? Hamas says, you can have the hostages, maybe, by the way. You can have them, but you have to stop the war, end the war, get out of Gaza, and leave Hamas in place and let them basically reconquer the Gaza Strip, for which they would commit these atrocities again and again. We can't agree to that. That's what people have to understand. But I will not relent on trying in every way possible to get those hostages back. And when we defeat Hamas, we'll get them back. And I think we'll get some of them back before. That's at least what I'm trying to do, to achieve.
But do you still feel like you have the mandate from the Israeli population?
The people don't lie. I mean, you could go in the streets and you could see the vast support that is there. You won't know it because, everybody's fixated on these protests, which are financed, organized, and so on. But they don't reflect the majority of the people any more than the mobocracies in American campuses, these protesters, these mobs, do they reflect the majority of the American people?
No.
No? Well, it's the same thing here. The majority of the people here support a victory. They want to see a victory. They want to see Hamas removed because they understand that their very future is online.
Well, at least I hope not. You know, on the protests on the college campuses, growing anti-Semitism, even beyond the campuses, I wonder what you think this security threat is to American Jews right now.
It's quite serious. I mean, I'm talking to my American friends who are Jewish, and they're saying, we never saw America like this. And I'm talking to my non-Jewish friends who are saying the same thing, and they're equally troubled by it. But I think it engenders an opposite reaction. I was so deeply moved the other day when I saw, these protesters, if you want to call them that, were burning American flags. And in, I think in a university in North Carolina, they took down the American flag, hoisted on the flagpole a Palestinian flag. And then American students, other students came in. They took down the Palestinian flag, rehoisted the American flag, and then stood around the flagpole to protect the American flag. And I was so deeply moved because these people really understand it's our common battle.
What about the economy? It's definitely taken a hit as a result of the war. How do you plan to turn that around without being able to give a specific timeline about when it ends?
Well, I think on the contrary, I think that the hit we've taken is relatively small because we have a very robust economy. I led the free market revolution here 20 years ago, which made Israel a technological powerhouse in the world. People are investing now, and if they're smart, they'll go now, because when we win the war, we also win the peace and win the economy. And people understand that. I'm having people come in here who say, we want to make Israel the hub and an AI leader, or one of the 3 leaders in the world. It already is. You know, we're number 4. We're number 1 in per capita investments in AI, number 1. But in absolute terms, in a country of just 10 million, we're number 4 in absolute terms in investments, in venture fund investments in AI in Israel. But I think we can go a lot further. Israel has a robust innovation society, and the future of economies is based on technological progress and on AI. We're committed to doing this, and I'm telling your listeners right now, your audience, the time to come into Israel is now, because we're going to rebound huge once this war is won, and you should be there, not at the ground floor, but don't wait to get at the top.
The rating agencies are cutting. They're worried about the deficits and the military spending.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I heard this before. I was finance minister here in the early 2000s. Nobody wanted to invest here. We had a terror intifada, and all that, and people didn't believe it. I said, look, we're going to do a revolution here. Israel is going to be transformed from a semi-socialist economy into one of the most robust free market systems, technological countries in the world. And I said, invest now. I don't think they believed me because they didn't. But those who did made a huge fortune here, huge fortunes. There are many billionaires in Israel. But I'm saying this now to you and to your audience.
It's also gotten very controversial.
Recorded. Here it is, Sarah. It's recorded. I'm telling you, Israel will be one of the most advanced technological societies, and among the 3 and perhaps among the 2 AI economies, leading AI economies in the world. That is worth a lot of money. Be part of it.
So, Mr. Prime Minister, you have been among the most vilified leaders in the last few months in the world. There is threats of prosecution from international courts. How are you dealing with all of this?
Well, I'm dealing with it because I'm not here for myself. I'm on a mission. And the mission is to protect the future of the Jewish people. And the Jewish people can only have a future if there's a Jewish state. Yes, we're imperiled, but we have the resolve and the spirit to fight back and to win. I visited yesterday some of our wounded veterans, lost limbs. It's just unbelievable what they say. They say, we're waiting to be fixed with an artificial leg because I'm going back to fight with my friends, with my colleagues, because we have to win. And that spirit is so powerful. It's so powerful that I don't think anything can I know nothing can stop it. And what I'm telling you is that when I think about, the vilification, the slanders, the lies, and the absurdities that are leveled at me, I don't think they're leveled at me. They're leveled at the country. And I'm not an outlier. I don't represent my policies or the policies of the extreme fringes in my government and all that ridiculous spin. I represent the broad majority of the Jewish people in Israel, and even many non-Jews, the Arab citizens of Israel, who understand that our common future is on the line. We have to win. And if I have to take slanders and vilifications, so be it. It's not the first time.
I think your father lectured until age 100. How long do you plan to be prime minister?
Oh, not until the age of 100, please. Mm-hmm. It's not. Look, I don't plan to be here. It's not my plan. It's what the people of Israel want. And so far, they've vested their trust in me because I reflect what they believe is the essence of our being. We have to ensure that what happened in the Holocaust doesn't happen again, that the peace that we've begun to form and that I led in the Abraham Accords, that it's broadened. It will only be broadened with Saudi Arabia and others if we win. If we lose, nobody will be interested in us. Victory is essential both for survival, for security, but also for peace and prosperity. You make alliances with those who win. You don't make alliances with the losers. And that's why, among other things, we will win. Speaking of the Abraham Accords, are you in touch with Donald Trump? Not recently, but I think he sent me a letter of congratulations when I was, when I was elected. So not since October 7th? No, but, I have always appreciated the support that he gave. It was very, very important. Supported us on recognizing Jerusalem as our capital, moving the embassy here, recognizing our sovereignty in the Golan Heights, and getting out of what I thought was a disastrous Iran deal. And I appreciate all of that, just as I appreciate the fact that we received the support we got from President Biden. I think ultimately the American people and the presidents of the United States, they look at the situation here in the Middle East and they say, who stands with America? Who stands for the same values that America has stood for? And the answer is Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for the time today. Thank you.